Great. Can you hear me? Welcome, everyone. Delighted to welcome everyone here, Your Highness, all the attendees, ladies and gentlemen. So we have a very high-powered panel today on the rise of Arab women. I'm overwhelmed, actually, to be hosting, moderating this panel. Maybe if we could start from this side with some quick introductions, and then we'll get straight into it. So just from my left here, we have Her Royal Highness
معنا صاحبة السمو الأميرة دينا الميراد والسمو الأميرة هي الرئيس المنتخب لاتحاد مكافحة السرطان الدولي. يسرنا تواجدك معنا صاحبة السمو، ومعنا أيضا سوفانا الدهلان وهي من المملكة العربية السعودية ورئيسة شركة محمد، كما أنه معنا سحر مصر وزيرة الاستثمار والتعاون الدولي. نرحب بك معالي الوزيرة. مريم الفوضري تترأس شركة أجيلتي وهي رئيس التنفيذي للتسويق في مجموعة أجيلتي. نرحب بالمتحدثات. إن المتحدثات في هذه الجلسة سوف يتناقشن في الكثير من المواضيع ويخبرنا بالخطوات والأفعال التي يمكن القيام بها في دول منطقة العربية. سمعتم من الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة الذي أشار أن نخسر 1.7 تريليون دولار، ولدينا تقديرات مختلفة، ولكن بالطبع نحن نخسر مليارات وتريليونات الدولارات في منطقتنا بسبب غياب مشاركة المرأة بالتحديد وتمكينها. ربما بإمكاننا أن نبدأ بسؤال مفتوح حول كيف يشعر أو كيف تشعر الشعوب حيال وضع الأهداف في منطقتنا. هل علينا أن نقوم بتفويض مثلا بعض المهام إلى المرأة بنسب معينة؟ هل علينا أن نطالب بأجور متساوية للرجال والنساء؟ هل علينا أن نطالب بإجازات أمومة أو إجازات أبوة؟ إذا ما على القطاع الخاص القيام به، وما على القطاع العام القيام به، وما على الحكومات القيام به للدفع قدما بجدول الأعمال هذا الذي أشرت إلى بعض بنوده. نبدأ معك مريم، تشاركي معنا تجربتك.
Thanks for the question. I mean, we were just talking about this in the other room, and I will tell you that I will be honest, I struggle with the idea of setting targets around gender, certainly in a private sector environment. And I don't say that lightly, right? So I work for a company, it's one of the region's few homegrown, truly global multinational companies. The chairperson is a woman, and the first chairperson of any publicly listed company in Kuwait was one of our subsidiary companies. So this is a company that takes the gender agenda quite seriously. But I think if we think about how we can incorporate more women in the workforce, should we be measuring women? Yes, we should be counting, right? We should be counting, tracking, and publishing information about how many women we have in the workforce at every level. Should we be mandating who moves forward or mandating 50% participation? I don't think we should. I think that we need to be more meritocratic, more open-minded, and sort of think about changing culture and think about ensuring that there's a role for women without mandating it. My own 2 cents.
Okay, and just to follow up, so what proportion of women, you're an organization with 22,000, you said, something like that. What is the overall proportion, and then what is the proportion at the senior level?
Okay, so we have a company of, we're 26,000 people around the world. 30% are women, and this is, remember, an industry that is logistics and transportation, where the bulk of people, the bulk of the sort of the workforce are people that are either driving trucks or working in a warehouse, so not a particularly, an industry associated with women, so 30% is actually high. At the management level, 30% are women, so a third, and this is around the world. And then at the director level, 20% are women, and at the executive level, 10%. are women. So that's a fairly common path. We see that around the world. These are, we measure these things, we report them on our website, and it's the start of, I think, a larger conversation, is being able to sort of know what is the level of women participation at various levels of the company, because it means that you can have other discussions, right? It means you can have conversations with recruiters that say, hey, make sure that when you are recruiting candidates for us externally, you're making, women part of the recruitment process, that you're also looking at qualified female candidates. And similarly, internally, it allows you to ask questions like, are we looking at all the qualified people for this position, and making sure that we're thinking about, who qualifies in an inclusive way.
Thanks. I think it's probably replicated elsewhere, that at the more junior levels we get a really high proportion, and then at the very senior level we're down to single digits in many cases. Maybe, Your Excellency, I can ask you, all the losses are happening in the middle. What is happening in the middle? Why are women dropping out right after, say, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years? And please don't say to get married and have children, because there's something else going on.
Here I think I want to highlight that I'm a believer of equal opportunity. I think that's the thrust of it all. We're, at the end of the day, why are we discussing women's empowerment? It's because we want to make sure your country is operating at its full potential, that your human capital and your human resources are efficiently utilized and contributing effectively to the economic sphere. And also research has shown that once there is economic empowerment, that translates into political and social empowerment. And that's the whole process where you can achieve inclusive and sustainable growth. So equal opportunity here means that the selection, whether it's for a job or access to credit, finance, any opportunity, is based on qualifications, experience, knowledge, what you have accomplished and achieved, that, and there's no gender discrimination in that's what I believe, and that is the only way we will achieve efficiency and inclusive growth in our nation. Governments, because we've also asked the question of the role of government. I think the government here is not just targeting a certain percentage of figures, but it does make a difference, at least in the short term. So when you see that the percentage of women that is getting access to credit is as low as 5% or 10%, then that's where you need to reflect on it and see what's happening, especially when you see that the non-performing loans for women is actually much lower, and that there is a perception sometimes that women investors are more risky, which evidence shows otherwise. So equal opportunity here is very important. The short term, I think intervention in terms of percentages will help a lot. For example, in Egypt, we made it sure that in the investment law we have a clear article that says equal opportunity for when there is no discrimination in terms of access to land and access to or any legislation that would be seen as a red tape or a bureaucracy for them to do business and to contribute to their families. So, in negotiating with our development partners and international institutions, yes, we do look at the percentages. I want to make sure that the line of credit part of it is allocated to women-headed households or women entrepreneurs, because it matters in terms of not just, it's not economics really, because it is efficiency, and that's the only way to reach your outcome.
Okay, I just want to ask you a quick follow-up question. We did a survey, we asked 3,000 women across Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, about their perceptions, etc. And one of the things that came out from Egypt, I just want to test it with you, was that there was a view that in Egypt women viewed work as work and not as a career.
على أنه عمل فقط وليس سيرة مهنية، في حين أن عمل الرجل ينظر إليه على أنه سيرة مهنية. وهنا السؤال المطروح، ما رأيكم بهذه النظرة؟ أعتبر بأن هذا يعكس أيضا نظرة المجتمع للمرأة، وعلى أن المرأة هي فقط أخت وأم وزوجة، وهي مسؤولة فقط عن رعاية الأطفال والمسنين وأفراد الأسرة.
I think the challenge here is the balance. I think how can we balance between our career, work, versus our family responsibilities. And this is where again the government comes in to provide the services that it takes for women to be able to balance between her responsibility, her family responsibility. But for women, of course, it's a career, and I think it's important how you bring up your children and your grandchildren, that they are also can play an active role in the economic sphere and not just in terms of their family. So.
Okay. All right, Sufana, you're from the Kingdom. Women empowerment's been embedded into Vision 2030. So there's a 30% target for participation. How are we doing on that? And we're seeing some pretty interesting and good progress. Perceptions have changed quite dramatically. How are you seeing things, and compare them? I think you're one of 3 Saudi female lawyers in the Kingdom. You are the first.
I'm one of the 3 first.
You are one of the first.
But now we're 280 lawyers.
Wow.
So.
Tell us a little bit about that journey and how perceptions are changing.
Well, when I graduated in 1995, women were not allowed to study law, not only to practice law. So it wasn't even perceived as a career in any way or form. But I think I grew in a household where we always looked out of the window and saw opportunities. So it wasn't really, for me, it was just a matter of time or a place to practice what I dreamed of. And when people think of law, they think, oh, she studied law, she has to be a lawyer. But this is not the case, because law gives you a set of skills to survive in any place and in any organization. It just structures your thoughts and builds your skills in communication. So graduating in 2000, I went with all my male friends from the same university who graduated at exactly the same time to get my certificate accredited. And this is where my first shock came. They said, "We're sorry, we cannot accredit your certificate because there is not a single university in Saudi that teaches law for girls."
Yeah.
So the solution was go back and study more Sharia courses so that we can consider it as a BA in Sharia. And so I went back, studied again, the master in Sharia, went back with both. And this is when they said, oh, you needed a male guardian companion with you during studying Sharia. So it took 13 years.
Okay.
But the interesting, I think it was a tipping point for me as a person when I realized when King Abdullah, Allah yarhamu, went to Majlis al-Shura and he gave his legendary speech about women partaking in the judicial system.
Yeah.
So being naive at that age, I ran with all my papers to Riyadh to the Ministry of Justice, and I entered Ministry of Justice. So the guy in the police officer was like, "Are you going to get in this way?" And I was like, "Which way?" And he's like, "Your face is not covered." So I had to cover my face. And I went in and I gave the papers to the guy in the lejna, and I'm like, I'm a lawyer, graduated, so excited, thinking that when this king says something, the second day it is going to be implemented.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that there is a whole lane of mindset that needs to be trickled down properly. So this guy tells me, not after 100 years, you're gonna be recognized as a lawyer. I'm like, الملك أمس قال.
Yeah.
قال ما سمعت. And he just treated me with so much disrespect that there is we say, people from Mecca have very hot-blooded thing. So ضرب العرق المكاوي.
Yeah.
So I just became so angry, but in a very passive way. And I went there for 6 weeks. Every Tuesday, he would find me. He was open in his office, and I would go in with him, and I would stay for 8 hours until he finished his dawam. What I've realized, is one thing. What I've realized that I went in with my own judgment. واحد ملتحي, an orange, you know, and he looked. مين هذه البنت اللي جاية من جدة وجاية تفرض نفسها علينا. So we both had this. We didn't talk, but we had judgment on the spot.
Right.
8 weeks after going every Tuesday, this guy treated me with so much disrespect that I was in the middle of a situation where I started crying and weeping and showing all my vulnerability. And his colleagues, this is when empathy hits in. His colleagues صاروا يعيبوا عليه. كيف كده وكيف تبكيها وليش. So this guy actually took the envelope without me knowing, اللي فيه كل أوراقي وشهاداتي. He processed my papers.
Right.
I came the next week thinking that I'm still challenging him, and I found a cake saying congratulations and the paper. And that taught me a lesson. It taught me إنه لازم نصبر شوية. We have to have patience in our people, in our systems. We have to be able to open the dialogue no matter how long it takes. Fast forward, it took so much effort to get the first license. Fast forward, I renewed my legal license in 24 hours.
Wow.
Guess why? Digitalization. Digitalization cut biases. So لا حد شافني ولا حد قال هذه من هنا ولا من هناك. So it actually changed the whole system. Now that's why we have 270 women. The second important thing is the leadership. The Minister of Justice himself started looking at files that are not very controversial. So digitalization was an easy one. But also تغيير الخطاب واختيار الكلمة and choosing the word actually makes a difference. When he announced that there are more Saudi women are becoming lawyers, he wrote شركات العدالة. And for people who know Saudi and Ministry of Justice would understand how important it is to put كلمة شركات العدالة. So now we are equal. حتى لو بكلمة.
Yes, very good. Thanks for that. Thanks for that really passionate. Princess Dina, what? Just thinking about the workplace for a moment, you have some clear thoughts. What should we be doing to make our workplace more conducive to having better gender diversity in there?
Well, thank you, Hani. I think from hearing from all our wonderful colleagues here, certainly we saw the barriers to women perhaps entering the workforce and actually remaining in the workforce and going up the career ladder. So there are two distinct issues. So on the one hand, I like your idea, especially when you explained it further inside the room when we were there, the fact that we need to put the conversation of having some kind of percentage of women, at least at the introductory level. But taking all else being equal, meaning meritocracy, everybody, you get 100 CVs of women and men, all fantastic, they are the caliber that could go to the next round, but actually having that conversation, or at least that, the conversation that it should be more or less equal. Because this is very much the case in Europe and the US. The organization that I'm leading right now, the Union for International Cancer Control, every time at the board level, we are thinking gender. It's there. It is there. And I think, if I want to say in Arabic, it's not going to happen. No. I think it has become a little bit of a conversation, but on a meritocracy level. Because we don't want people to think, let's hire females because haram. No, we have a lot to offer and a lot of skills to bring to the table that are currently not utilized as they properly should. So on the one hand, I like that because then it becomes habitual and then it becomes odd for somebody to be a CEO of the company and he or she see that there's such a gap between that. So I think that will put the conversation. That's one. The other thing about women remaining, I think it's really about supporting the family. Whether we like it or not, there's going to be, a woman is going to go and have babies. And it's the family issue, I would say, to have, like you said, paternity leave for men who also would love actually to also share the joys of parenthood and, be with their kids and so on. And they are half the time also deprived of that. At the same time, to have that, it equalizes it a little bit. So perhaps a couple in a family, perhaps the woman that exactly comes having babies at sort of the middle of her career when it's either she goes home and misses that opportunity to rise up the ladder, that's when perhaps her husband could have a paternity leave, a bit of, partnership and so on. Society should really support the family, and currently the way businesses work and so on, it's not really supportive of a family-friendly environment. So usually it's the woman who takes the cut and says, okay, I'm going to step back to build this family. So that's one issue. The other solution, if we're looking at solution, starts really from the education. When you look at in our, like, for example, in your case or in many of our cases, it starts from the textbooks that we see from grade 1. And it's not just for girls. It's very much, we still see the traditional roles for women that, we're limited, but what we can and we cannot do. So we absorb that as we are young. And at the same time, the boys absorb it. Don't forget, half the time in our societies, the male himself can be a barrier without him knowing that he is being a bad guy or not. It's just the way it is. If they are not from a young age understanding that women can choose to be and to reach their potential and be whatever they want to be, they should be able to have that chance, the equal opportunity. So he becomes a limiting factor when he or she grows up, becomes a father to his girls or a husband to his wife, and so on and so forth. At the same time, the women, when we look at these textbooks and we see, our narrative in very limiting, it's also bad. And by the way, it's not just in our area. You're getting another extreme case globally now where the media, that's also another thing, the media portraying women now with reality TV and all these sort of celebrity type, they're also now going back to objectifying women as a physical object just there to seduce men. This is what we see right now. Also not showing role models of women being successful CEOs, successful lawyers, able to do things and be a really own our position in society. So you're getting actually a backlash from both sides. And that is something also to look at.
Okay, just quick time check. So we'll have the opportunity to ask questions. We'll leave about 15 or 20 minutes to ask questions. So start to get those ready. You've heard a lot of really good content, and we have a fantastic high-profile panel. Just to ask you, so, in the Middle East at PwC, we're 5,500 people. We recruit 500 graduates every year. We force half of the graduates to be women. And we've done that for the past 4 years, and it's made a huge difference to the business. It's brought in a new generation of millennials who think differently, who want a different career path, and who are very ambitious, extremely ambitious, I would say. Setting that target made a very big difference to the business. It changed the composition of it. We're still light at the top, very light. I want to ask you, because you're all very successful in your own fields, what was it? Did you have a coach, a mentor, someone who looked after you that helped you get through those difficult times? And maybe it's an open question for anyone who wants to have that, because one of the things we're noticing is not having enough senior women who are coaches, mentors, inspirations, role models for the younger ones is causing an issue. So does anyone have a view as to whether someone looked after you, coached, mentored, was a role model for you?
I have a comment on this one. I mean,
sure.
I think one thing that I would say is that we need to be very mindful about what some of the barriers or some of the constraints are, right? So there are some things that, I would point out. One is visibility at the top, so the visibility of female leadership. The other is flexibility and family-friendly policies, because it does take, it takes a whole, especially when you have children, it takes a certain corporate or organizational attitude towards the family to allow you to succeed. And I would say, if you're asking for sort of personal experience, I would say one of the things that, really struck me was when I had my first child. The day that I went to the hospital to deliver my child was the day that Agility made me a senior vice president. And, for somebody that just had a baby, when you're trying to decide if you're going to go back to work or not, that show of support was invaluable. So I knew my company had my back. And I think, that more, mentorship and coaching, of course, is important it doesn't have to be from a woman. Mentorship and coaching is a career maker in any context. So having, mentors and coaches is important, whether it's male or female. But that notion that your company has your back and is willing to take into account your family life as well. And I think that in a Middle Eastern context, we talk as if it's such a tragedy, that there are all of these barriers and constraints to women in the Middle East. I think we also have to recognize that in some ways, this part of the world respects and appreciates the family dynamic more perhaps than many other parts of the world, and that is true for both men and women. And if we can parlay that into organizational policies that allow women to stay in the workforce and that encourage them to thrive even in the context of their families, we can be really very successful without overcoming huge cultural constraints to get there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Can I just add to that? I really second what you've said. When I was the Director General of the King Hussein Cancer Foundation, the policy, the organizational policy and the cultural vibes of the organization was that, because I had 99% females, because that's in the NGO world, it just so happens that females apply to us more, so we were not discriminatory against men by any ways. But it was an amazing team. And definitely, I made it a point that if their children are sick, they don't even have to tell me. They inform us. They inform their boss. Listen, my kid is sick. That's it. Flexi hours. There was that sense of women supporting women who've had children and so on. And you cannot imagine how much the productivity not only stayed the same, it was even more. People who have this kind of freedom, they actually appreciate it and they actually give you more. So I've never had to say, what are you doing at home while you're taking care of your kids? They would actually get the job done. So it's very important to have that parlayed into organizational structure.
So Your Excellency, did you have someone coach, mentor, guide you, be a role model to you? Where was the drive and inspiration coming from?
Number one, I think that takes me to your very initial question about the survey conducted in the different Arab countries. I think that women have to believe in themselves first, and they have to be committed, hardworking, and in some cases, yes, sometimes we go an extra mile, but I think believing in yourself matters, and working hard to fulfill it, perseverance, being patient and committed, and I think that would be number one. Then I agree also that you need a conducive environment overall. I think it starts also with the family, the family or your partner, and how that also be understanding and encouraging. I think that also is another important criteria that is also we have to not neglect in any way, and that is also including sharing responsibility of family and children. And I agree with Princess Dina that I think it's also a joy being with the children. So it's not like a responsibility, but it's also part of being part of the family and sharing, bringing up the children or taking care of your parents or elderly. I think that's in itself is part of being a family. Then again, the institutions where you work, and this is where maybe the affirmative action matters, because when there is a huge gap, like 3% only representation of women. So like I reflected Egypt, and I'm very proud we're 8 women ministers, and that's like historical, never happened. So we are now saying we should be more, and I think what we're trying to do, 8 of us, is yes, show that we can deliver, and whether we are there or not depends on our performance, basically, and has nothing to do with our gender in any way. It's what we perform, what we deliver, and what we are able to achieve. And so it's a different interplay here, and also our parliament is important. I think we also have a 15% women in parliament. That matters because they've contributed in many of the laws. For example, we had issues regarding I looked at the rating, for example, of the World Bank IFC doing business, and then I see Egypt in establishment wasn't doing well in the past. So I said, but why? We've streamlined everything. We have the investment law, we have They said, but because somewhere in the law there is women need to take permission before they travel. So this is considered one of the barriers for her to do business. So it's not even, so these are the things that we review as policymakers, and this is where the parliament also plays a very active role. When the investment law was discussed, they said there has to be an article where they would just get equal access, and also in terms of their access to land, and that also even in finance, we had to also make sure that it's all done in a very professional manner. So I see it as a package, and obviously we look up to women, and I think that's what the WEF is currently doing, is also bringing women in several of the sessions, not just where we're focused on women, but I see in energy you have women represented there, security, in peace, education. And I think that is also having women sit on the decision-making table, I think matters a lot, because they bring also a very important perspective, not just on women, but also on family. Great. So I see like it's a combination of several factors that lead to the success of women and leads to more empowerment of women.
Great. We'll go to audience questions in a second, but Sufana, you mentioned you were the first of 3 Saudi women.
Yeah.
You mentioned 280.
Yeah.
But we need thousands of Saudi women lawyers, thousands, on a country of that size and importance, G20 economy, a huge, ambitious nation. How do we get to the thousands? What do we need to change? What are the policies? What are the steps? What are the actions required to get us to a game-changing level?
This is live streaming, right?
Yes.
I think what we're missing today is more women who are faqihat, who are going to be in Hayat al-Ulama, who can interpret the verses of Quran in a more contemporary way. Then you're going to have more women everywhere. You know, as long as we still have that piece missing, that's a problem. I think having a lot of women in policy making is one thing, but if you interpret, religion is in every house, right? So if you are able to change mindset through, I'm not saying change religion. You see, one of the main motives was that my grandmother used to tell me so many stories. One of the stories is how Sittana Khadija proposed to the Prophet.
Yeah.
And for me, that is the most empowering thing ever. If I will be able to propose to a man, and then this is the ultimate thing. And she was his mudira.
We're okay with that, by the way. We're cool with that.
Woman. I know, but I mean, this is so empowering, and nobody found this as aib or haram. Yes. So that's one. The second thing is, she used to tell me, she's, I'm going to say it in Arabic, and maybe you can translate it. She's like, دبت رجل الست اللي في جيبها.
A woman who has money in her pocket is different than a woman who does not have money in her pocket.
It was the image of the shackling coins in her pockets.
Yeah.
But as I grow older, it was about my financial independence.
Yeah.
If I earn the money, I decide where the money goes. I decide what I'll do with it. I'll decide where I buy, which school my daughters will go to.
So just following up on your point, which is I think is a very good one, shouldn't we just mandate that we have female participation in Hayat al-Ulama as an example, and then let it cascade from there?
I don't think it's one model. I think every nation has to develop organically based on the readiness of the society and the organization, but we have to be committed to being ready. We don't need to copy-paste anything. I mean, I just find it odd. Yes, we need to put some policies at some place at some times, and then we need to be agile to remove these policies and leave things to grow organically.
Yeah.
But it is important now to have some women in leadership position, in policy-making position, because it does change things. And when I say Hayat al-Ulama or Hayat al-Kibar al-Ulama, I'm saying social policies. I'm saying mindset. I'm saying father implementing guardianship concept in the right manner, not in the wrong manner.
Right. Fair enough. So I was just referring to our survey. Fully 2/3 said that the government should intervene to set targets for companies in the private sector around that. I have to say our own experience at the graduate level, the graduate level has been extremely positive, and I would suggest that. Going to questions from the audience. Does anyone here, we have one here. Maybe just wait for the mic to come around.
Honey, can I just say one thing until the mic goes around?
Sure.
Just really quickly. If you look at Kuwait, right, where the government of Kuwait constitutionally guarantees a job for every citizen, everybody, you have a situation in which 60% of Kuwaiti women are working. The ratio of men to women in the workforce is 60-40, women to men. So I don't know that it's all about just mandating targets. It's also about creating opportunities. You don't necessarily have to force it. If the opportunities exist, women take them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Hi, my name is Arij Al-Hassan. I'm a global shaper from Riyadh Hub.
Yeah.
As Ms. Safana earlier mentioned, that Saudi Arabia is moving toward empowering women and giving them the opportunity to have jobs and be contributing elements to the community. Me, as a recently graduate lady and someone who just entered the workforce, yes, that the government believes in us and we got the chance to enter the work field and contribute a lot, but sometimes you face that barrier, which is a cultural one, where some people, not necessarily men, sometimes even women, don't realize, they resist the successfulness of women or giving the opportunities to them internally on the scale of their company or their department, just because they're women, and some of them do it consciously and some of them unconsciously. And I really think that it's an issue with the Middle East culture or the Middle Eastern, let's say, yes, cultural and history and the way they perceive women. My question is for the Balinarly ladies here who are, mashallah, well accomplished and at the top of their career, is how did you come across or how did you deal with these cultural barriers and these cultural ideas or beliefs in your career path? I really think that it's not only an issue with the Middle Eastern. I just attended a women empowerment plenary session in Riyadh, where one of the Australian first ladies, lawyer ladies in the media sector, told us that even in Australia and even in the UK, when she enters, she meets a client, he would start talking with the junior beside her just because he's man, he's not a woman. And even though she's more senior than him. How can we deal with these issues and how can we overcome them and how can we change the perspective of or the mindset of men to perceive us as equals and a capable equivalent or
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Who wants to take that? Sufana, you want to have a go? Or
yeah, sure.
Hang on, Her Excellency seemed, her eyes were sparkling there. Go ahead.
No, because in life I personally faced a lot of challenges and hurdles, so I understand very much what she's saying, whether, by the way, at the family level or at the work level. So it's reality. I mean, I like also to be very candid on that. But I think my answer is just being persistent and insisting on getting your right to contribute to the family, to contribute to your country's economy, to your policy making. I think that is what makes success. And insisting to succeed. Because it's not just working. It's not just starting your business or even being employed, but being persistent, hardworking, and really achieving and delivering. I think that's what matters. Because I personally did face some challenges on both, because at one point in time you have also to strike this balance, which is very challenging, because also women go through different phases in life. It depends on you're married or you're not married, what age bracket your children are, and then when they grow, then it becomes so one first needs to be flexible and adjust, but also persistently work hard to deliver and prove oneself, and that's the only way you can make it. That's why I believe in mentors and I believe in institutions, but I will put number one, you.
Fair enough. Okay, other questions? Look how many questions. Fantastic. Maybe we start from this end and then we'll get some men involved too. So, all right. We were told the session would be all women. I'm happy to say, how many is that,
But our moderator is the man.
We had a bet.
Okay,
I said 20%. I was wrong and thrilled to be wrong.
So just over here maybe, and then we'll go back to the guys.
Good afternoon. So Sarah Schwab, the Experience Accelerator. I am very passionate about the problem of us losing women sort of mid-career, and having sat through a number of promotion committees myself, I see that there's a problem with unconscious bias at those critical decision moments in your career. You know, I remember, oh, well, Sarah, mum of 3, probably won't want to take that promotion because it'll be too demanding for her, so we won't even offer it. What type of thing have you seen that's been successful in tackling unconscious bias?
Okay, anyone want to have a go at that? Go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
I think the first thing we need to be conscious of our own bias, because if we were able to identify it within us, we will be able to actually assist people who are in front of us to identify that they're having a bias. And it is only through dialogue and probably questioning them is to make them realize it. We cannot just stick it there in their face and say, you know, you're biased, because they're going to be resistant and they're going to be actually fighting to prove that they're not, and it will still be there. So it's really dialogue. In terms of losing women in the middle, few years back, I was the vice governor of the SME Authority in charge of entrepreneurship advancement. And one of the things I've noticed is that they had a target that I have to increase women's participation for 30%. And then when I looked around, I said, okay, I know where are the women. I'm not going to tackle schools because there are so many people tackling schools and accelerators. I'm going to look for the moms, and we're going to transform the moms into entrepreneurs, because I believe that motherhood is exactly the same set of skills you need as an entrepreneur. Patience, multitasking, decision-making. It is exactly the same thing. And when we had 50 women moms in the room, varying from 60 years old to probably dubahat 19 sana, and we asked them, when you want to take your child to a doctor, this is the situation. What is the process of taking that decision? And she identified. I said, can you please use the same process into deciding whether or not you're going to take this investment or not? Treat your business as a baby. This is going to actually increase women's participation in the workforce, because you're just changing the set of skills she's earned. And you don't call her that she's outdated and so on. And going back to the young lady, discrimination is going to always be there, whether it's gender, وبعد شوية age, وبعد شوية يعني بتطلع. But in all cases, wear all the negative labels the society give you with pride. So if people call you the B word or whatever words, just wear it and walk with so much pride.
Okay. Just follow-up comment. So one of the results of our survey was very clearly, and one of our recommendations was it should be data-driven. So I think it's on organizations to understand and analyze those promotions, to understand whether there's a bias in there, and if typically you spend 3 years at a particular grade and then you get promoted, why didn't the people who had spent 3 years at that, the women who had spent 3 years at that grade, who are well-rated, why did they not get promoted? And there needs to be answers for that. So that was clearly one of the recommendations. Let's have one of the men ask a question.
Thank you. Mustafa Tabba, Ipsos MENA. I wish we had a businessman sitting amongst you and put them on the spot. Anyway.
What am I,
Sorry, I meant panelist. Okay. So I guess I won't be asking any more questions.
Sit down.
Just a comment, because I felt there wasn't a consensus on the issue of putting ratios or percentages. I think what's important is to make the playing field equal. So Your Royal Highness, Princess Dina, you said about giving certain issues like if the kids are sick, they stay at home, and we talk about work at home policies, we talk about technology and being able to operate and work anywhere. I think those things are making the playing field equal, and so you can do whatever you want, and without putting the percentages on businesses. At the end of the day, businesses want to select the best person for the job, and I think smart business people will generally find out that in many cases, women would surpass men in doing the job. I come from a background where Ipsos were 50% women globally of 17,000 students. In MENA, it's 52. In Jordan, it's 70% of our office in Jordan are women. And we're probably the best performing office in the region. So I think we don't need to go into percentages, but we need to make the playing field equal.
Thank you.
Can I comment on that?
Sure.
Yeah. I just thank you, Mustafa. I just wanted to reiterate when I said when all else being equal, especially at the introductory level, I said if you have 100 CVs, all fantastic CVs, meritocracy, it's been established, then I think, it doesn't have to be 50-50, but at least minimum, because some, you may be somebody who's worldly, exposed, you're a projection of your own cultural upbringing, and you may, appreciate women, or you are supportive of women and so on, so you would have that. But many companies, they also have lots of biases. So if you have at least a minimum whereby there is some kind of uproar at the board level, look guys, look, this looks really terrible, we have 90% men, 10 women, how come is that, Especially in Jordan and in many people in the Arab world, you've got women, filling up all the university seats and women taking up the #1 slot. Don't forget the investment the country actually puts in all these females, and later on not utilizing them. I mean, the country is losing a lot as well.
That's right.
So sometimes it's about putting the conversation out there. Let's not forget that many women all around the world, in Europe, in America, nobody gave them the rights on a plate. They actually made lots of noise. Nobody gave them the right to vote just because they felt like it. If we left it to men during those days, nothing would have happened. All these suffragettes and so on, they went out on the streets to actually demand their rights.
Yeah.
So, I like your idea as long as meritocracy is established, just to put the conversation out there so it becomes a habit. So there will be a natural uproar when there's such an imbalance in that. That's
fair enough. Maybe we could go just here to the front row. Just here in the front row.
Yeah, my name is Raghida Dargham. I'm a journalist, as you know, most of you, but I'm also the founder and executive chairman of Beirut Institute, a think tank for the Arab region with global reach. Just want to put the thought to you, excellent panel, excellent moderator. I want to try to supplement what Sofana said to the young lady. Yes, persistence is a very important asset, but when you're being fought systematically, and God knows I was fought because I entered the world of politics, as a correspondent, as a journalist, geopolitics were reserved for men. So when I entered that field, I was resisted quite a lot. So stay the course, keep your head into it, but reinvent yourself. That's the point I want to make. It is so important whenever there are obstacles to think ahead, stay the course on that thing, but go ahead and reinvent yourself. That's the asset of young women, and we're going to need it. God knows you're going to need it throughout. So don't be afraid to reinvent yourself, and I don't know if that will solicit any comments from the wonderful panelists.
I think, just to add to that, I think, we've had 3 or 4 questions, and I would say the answer to all of those questions can be summed up in one word. It's excellence, right? How do you counter discrimination when people, how do you just counter discrimination? It's by being excellent. How do you counter unconscious bias? It's by showing excellence. How do you reinvent yourself? You must be excellent. And I think, especially in a private sector environment, which does reward talent and does reward ability, because that is the foundation of profitability, there is, a role for being excellent. And I think this is where institutions that are driven by the profit motive can actually be extremely powerful, because you're not going to walk away from your most talented people. Whether they're a man or a woman, it just doesn't matter. Talent is talent. And talent is scarce in this part of the world. We have a lot of people and a lot of well-educated people, but unfortunately, you know, when it comes to the workforce, do we have people that show up ready and skilled with the skills required to sort of take the workforce, you know, where it needs to go? Frankly, not always.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. And then we'll go there, and then we'll wrap it up.
Hi, Elisa Farah Antonios. I work for Citibank. I just don't want to leave. I see, you know, like the lady here, a lot of young talent around us as well. I just don't want to leave them with the thought that if they're not excellent, they cannot make it. We never ask that question to our boys. And Hani, I know you and I have discussed this numerous times. I think in organizations, we need to demand quotas. Yes. We need to demand it. And we need to pass it through legislation as well, or else we're not going to move the needle. Right. We've been talking about this for a very long time. I think most of us are a bit sick of coming to conferences and trying to always point out that, you know, girls need to, you know, prove themselves. They need to be persistent. You look at studies, women are promoted if they've proven themselves. When men are promoted on potential. And that's the difference. So there's a lot of work to be done at home. There's a lot of work to be done as far as unconscious bias is concerned. But I don't want to leave this audience I don't want this audience to leave by thinking that if the girls don't exert excellence, they don't make it. So just that.
Thanks for that. Okay, so let's go for the youngsters who I think we have just one of our colleagues there, and people are really engaged on this conversation.
Yes, thank you so much. I would just like to echo that what my friend said from the Global Shapers community and from the Global Shapers community as well, that women are the enemy of women for one reason or another. And I'd just like to say that I think gender parity is no longer a point of discussion. It's a moral question and a moral demand. We're facing climate change, and the most impacted by climate change will be women, the most vulnerable, the women who have to go and do extra hard work to be excellent. So why are we still discussing if maybe we put quotas or no? It's a demand, it's a need. Being in the private sector, I have to prove myself just to get promoted. I live a fact that I get paid less as an engineer, although I am way better than my male engineer, just because I am a woman. I think it's a moral question, and this is what the governmental sector should do and what the private sector should tackle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're hearing that younger generation is pretty demanding, and I commend you for that, actually, and I agree with you that if you don't set specific targets, things don't change. And so I'm not sure I would use the word quota, but I would certainly use the word target, and I would institute it at the graduate level, at the promotional level, at the pay level, and throughout the organization. Maybe time for one more question. Who wants to ask it? Maybe you've been trying very hard? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. People are lobbying for you.
Hi, my name is Asma. Yes, a global shaper. Thank you. I'm a global shaper from Gaza. What I really want to ask is about fragile context. Now, it's not that women constitute the largest workforce in informal economy. In informal economy, it's very difficult to monitor whether women are actually being promoted, whether they receive good salaries or not, working conditions or not. So my question to the panel, and maybe even the private sector, please jump in, is how can we encourage but also hold private sector accountable, particularly when government has so much priority to consider this a priority? Thank you.
Okay, anyone want to have a go? Yeah. Your Excellency, go ahead. No?
Can you clarify?
Can you clarify the question?
So for example, in informal economy, for example, in the agriculture or in the food processing sector, women are considered one of the largest percentage of workforce, but yet they work in extremely bad working conditions. Now, because those companies function in informal economy, meaning they don't have like systems in place. Sometimes they are not registered. So it's very difficult to monitor and try to push them to uphold to the regulation. If it's not registered at the Ministry of Economy, it's very hard to like monitor. But informal economy, it's a huge employer of women. So how can we push for like encouraging private sector that, okay, you employ women, it's your largest workforce, but then you also have to give them decent salaries. You have to have functioning in good working conditions. It's horrible, the working conditions women work in informal economy. And even those who work in informal economy and they want to penetrate to marketing or trade, they cannot because they are faced with so much barriers. Usually trade and marketing is controlled by, it's a male-dominant profession. So how can private sector like kind of see but also be accountable for providing decent working conditions?
All right, so the question was, what should the government do to push more regulations into the informal economy?
I think it's how to bring the informal, basically the informal sector into the real economy. And let me share with you like 2 interventions that the government of Egypt has done, because our informal sector is really huge, not just in agriculture, but it's across the board. And we managed to also conduct research and analysis to see why are they not joining the real sector. So we had to provide first incentives for them to transform from the informal sector to the formal sector by showing them that once they register, they'll have access to concessional financing, that once they register, they would also not find major challenges in terms of taxes, because often that's the main purpose of remaining informal. So we also made sure that the taxes that they would be exempted from for certain years from paying taxes, because then it would go. And more important, we have adjusted the companies law and allowed for شركة الشخص الواحد, because sometimes the laws were hindering the establishment of a single person's owning a company, and that he would need some partners. So these are the various measures. But another important initiative, which is the second initiative, is we have launched the gender seal. And the gender seal would also be granted to companies that would only ensure not just for women. And again, I'm very much for equal opportunity and a level playing field. And I always say we just need equal rights so that we excel and succeed. And the gender seal is given to companies and factories and that are taking into account anything related to the working environment for women and men, and also that ensures gender mainstreaming in their workforce. So these 2 initiatives have helped significantly in transforming a large number of the informal sector into the formal sector. So that's
very good.
Then I think it responds to your question, because your concern is the employees of an informal company, they don't have access to the health insurance, the unemployment packages, and all the different rights, maternity leave, all the different rights that their pensions too. So that way it ensures also a much more friendly working environment for all.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we're going to have to call it there. Let me just say on behalf of the panelists, thank you very much for your engagement. And let me just also say a big thank you to this distinguished panel that we have. Thank you very much today for your...
Thank you.